City Council in person, Monday, April 6, 2026 at 6 p.m. at City Council Chambers. Second, for the purpose of discussing traffic and parking, in person shall be the primary method of such meetings. A secondary method of public access may be provided if technologically feasible through Salem Access Television or remotely through Zoom. See below remote and SAT information. Please click the Zoom link below, password 859-8684-9471, or telephone. The primary purpose for this meeting will be in person. We are having a few technical difficulties with Zoom, so we will try to do our best with anyone in the Zoom land as well. So tonight, we have 3 items. We have number 466. This is from 2025, an ordinance to amend an ordinance relative to traffic. Chapter 42, Section 75A, resident sticker for the month of October, fall resident parking. We have number 139 of 2026, in order to amend an ordinance relative to traffic, Chapter 42, Section 75A, temporary resident parking, September 15th through November 1st, already been adopted for first passage. And number 48 of 2026, meet to discuss implementation of resident sticker visitor passes. So today we have all members of the committee. From Committee of a Whole, we have Councilor Sidoriak, Councilor Hapworth, Councilor President Merkel, Councilor Flynn, Councilor King, Councilor Davis, and Councilor Turowski. We also have David Kucharski, Director of our Transportation Department as well. So we will get started with probably the easiest. So let's start with number 466, an ordinance to amend an ordinance relative to Chapter 42, 75A, resident sticker parking for the month of October, fall resident parking. So we can start off with the council, or we can start off with Mr. Kucharski. I know you guys had some questions about this one. So number 466. So, Mr. Kucharski, if you could come on up here, I'd appreciate it.
David Kucharski, City of Salem Transportation Director. I must admit I was not aware of Amendment 466, that it had been filed last September. I sat down with the mayor at the end of last year, and he asked that I work with the Transportation Commission to look at extending the temporary parking from September 15th until the November 1st. And then I met with the Transportation Commission this past January. We discussed it, and the recommendation that I've submitted to you all is for that, and that's actually Amendment 139. So I know there's slight differences. I'm not sure how you want to handle that.
All right. Under discussion, Councilor Prosniewski.
Thank you, Chair Varela. Seeing that the resident parking issue is going to be brought up a little bit later on, and this may affect how Mr. Kucharski is going to be delegating the October parking. Maybe we should take that up first, because that may play into what's going to happen in October, and that also gives him a chance to catch up on 466
Awesome.
earlier.
Can I call for a 1-minute recess, please? Thank you. Can I have 2 hands? Thank you. All right. All right. All right. Thank you, everybody. We will proceed. Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Chair. So just as I understand it, 139 is an update to 466. I believe 466, I think, was submitted by Councilor Watson-Felt possibly, or there was some conversation there. 139 is the one that you and your office have worked on and submitted that does exactly what 466 was to do. Is that
With the exception of the rooftop parking, we didn't recommend changing that. So I'd say that, and the dates are slightly different. We were also thinking in terms of how do we sign it. So that's why we picked the 15th of September, just to make it clear, rather than I think it's the third Friday in September, just fitting that on a sign and making it clear to the general public.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, we can move on if Councilor Prezinski recommended, but I think that we would probably discharge, I would guess probably discharge 466, because 139 is the same ordinance with just some changes, but.
All right. Second. All right, so Councilor Hepworth is moving to discharge, seconded by Councilor Przewalski. All those in favor? Under discussion. Councilor Smith.
I just want to state for the record, so that just to make sure, the 466 still does have that the residents would park on the roof. So we're not is that correct? Can I ask? I'll go over here. Page 2 of section 75A.
Do you mean Amendment 139 or Amendment 466?
No, 466. I'll be very candid, I don't want to vote against something, I'm for something that would have spared certain residents the roof, but it is in here that it's the roof, and I would like to
Councilor Hepworth.
We're not voting, just to be clear, we're not voting against everything inside of 466. 139 is almost duplicative of 466. So if you see something in there you want to add into 139, you could. I think
But later.
it's creating probably confusion for people at home who are seeing what's in OLA right now, and I think it would make the most sense to remove 466, and then if you see something in there again you like, put it back into 139.
Very good. Councilor Hepworth moved to discharge, seconded by Councilor Przewalski. All those in favor for discharge, let the record show. I see 4 hands plus my own. Matter carries. All right, so that's discharged. Now we have number 139, an ordinance to amend an ordinance relative to traffic parking, 4275A, temporary parking, September 15th to November 1st, already been adopted for first passage. Mr. Kucharski, if you may.
So again, I submitted a red line version, which for the most part removes the word October and replaces it with temporary. And then rather than from October to November 1, it's September 15 to November 1. Those are the main changes throughout the document. And then the additional changes in section C, where we added an additional address, 13 Hawthorne Boulevard. Per their planning board decision, they're required to buy passes to the city garage, and as such, given the language, they have the ability to purchase a pass to the roof because of that requirement. So.
All right.
But again, I will note, we did not change the time frame for the roof parking. It's still within October only.
Very good. Under discussion. Councilor Laba.
Thank you, Chair Varela. I'm excited to kick off the week of talking about parking in our road infrastructure. I guess a couple of questions about the resident permit parking program more broadly. Director Kucharski, I'm wondering if you could give us, and just for the record, like a 30-second summary of what this program is and what it entails from the city's operations side.
It's a resident program that's been in place, I believe, since the 1990s. There's currently about 108 streets that are designated for resident permit parking out of 600. If you want to get into more detail, out of the 22,000 dwelling units in the city, about 3,120, so like 14%, participate in this program. That's year-round only. That does not include the October. We've worked with council to update the program. When it was initially established, it was based on the ward boundaries. So those were the zones that were created at the time. We've worked over the last few years, when I say we, I mean the department, the commission, and the council, to redefine those boundaries so they're more neighborhood boundaries in nature. And we also worked on increasing the fees to cover the new costs that came with migrating from a sticker and hang tag system to a license plate-based system to cover the cost of the technology. We have LPR systems, hardware, software in 2 of our parking enforcement vehicles. We have handhelds. There was some overlap in pricing because we had handhelds with the older system, but we were hoping to streamline it, make it more effective administrative-wise, and also allow enforcement to go through areas in a more timely fashion. That's kind of it in a nutshell. I can go through some of the pricing changes that council voted back in '24, but that's kind of it.
I guess then just at a high level, are we covering our costs in terms of what it costs for the city to make the signs, put the signs up? Enforcement is involved in that. For my perspective to the council and to the folks at home, want to make sure that we're being cognizant of the people that are being impacted by tourism, right? Like the last thing anyone wants is to not be able to live their life, go to work, pick their kids up, get food, but we also need to make sure that this is being fiscally responsible. And from the numbers that I'm aware of at large with the city is that we are heavily subsidizing our automobile infrastructure, and we have almost no alternatives. And that's something that, for myself, I don't want to see us continue to do. So as we're talking about finances and fees, and is this program working the way that we want it to, that's sort of my perspective on this, is what does the fiscal lens look like here?
We did an estimate of expenses when we were changing the system. I'm happy to sort of provide that again. I don't have all the details right now.
Just to be clear, I'm sort of more interested in like the ongoing operations. I understand there's like capital investments that got made, right? And I get that. I'm thinking more of the ongoing, the reoccurring costs that end up in the budget as operations.
Again, I'd have to, we have staff that go out and enforce. They're doing other enforcement. They're not just doing resident permit streets, but if, say, they're doing a regular route and they it's hard to define specifically what we do. Some have argued that the streets that are just designated for residents were putting money into pave or work. It can go back and forth. I'd say we try our best. That's why we came up with the new pricing that we did, to try to at least cover the costs that we were identifying for the program. October is another story where we don't charge for the permits that we give out. They're all it's no longer distributed by mail, so there's some savings in that. However, there's back-end costs with putting them into the system with the vendor that we do use. So there are ongoing costs that I don't want to give you a wrong number. I don't have specifics, but it is something that I could look into if the council would like to see that.
That's good for me for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Under discussion. Councillor Hapworth and Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Director Kucharski, could you talk through the discretion of the office in terms of, I think the questions that we get from people are about, someone might live in Lynn and they work in Salem, and they work downtown. How would someone like that qualify for the resident pricing and ensure they're not paying the price that a tourist pays to park downtown in October?
So if they're not a resident?
They're not a resident, but they're a downtown employee. Is there a method for them to?
We don't have anything specific for that. We do provide, obviously, the skipper service and other transit options, and we've been giving away free monthly memberships to Blue Bikes, to not just residents, but to employees who work downtown. If a business happens to be on a street that's been designated for October, if either it's a doctor's office or some type of retail establishment that just happens to exist, we issue permits to those employees. We also do that for healthcare workers that are visiting residents on those streets. So we try to work as best as we can with the various types of people, but we don't have anything specific for the employees. We suggest, sorry,
yeah, you said if a business is on that street, then they would be eligible?
Correct.
Okay. I think that was my question there. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the streets listed in subsection A of this section 175A, none of these streets have resident parking year-round. Is that correct? They are all added just for this?
That's correct.
And then are sometimes, I did have a question from somebody that was specific about something like Lynn Street, which is something I go down every day, and, it's too narrow for cars to even get through there. Do you sometimes just put these signs up in order to make sure nobody parks in his area where it wouldn't otherwise be safe to park, let's say?
So part of this is designating streets that may not have legal physical parking on them, but we understand that now you've created almost like an island where you have residents who don't have off-street parking, and everywhere around them is October parking. So we included them so that they can apply for and park in the zone, essentially, the October zone. So it's not
I see.
It's not physically possible for everyone who lives on a particular street if there's no other parking to park on the street. So when we designate the temporary parking, is intended for the residents who live in and around that neighborhood to park in and around that neighborhood. Same with the zones. If you live in the Willows, you could park on any street that's in Zone B. If you live in the Derby neighborhood, you could park on any street that's in Zone A. That's the intent.
I see. So a lot of thought goes into this, a lot of work.
Yes, well, when we were, this was a thing we did back in 2019-20. There was a number of different orders and ordinances that were conflicting. We kind of took everything, worked with the commission at the time to clean it up and specifically look at where we were seeing parking activity and the demand. So that's when we went street by street and even identified areas where they didn't necessarily have physical parking, but they were within the boundaries of where we were establishing October parking, temporary parking.
That is good to know. Do residents typically will have to apply for this separately, even if they're already in the resident parking program? Because I guess they wouldn't normally.
For the temporary?
It would be in both, correct?
Correct. Yes, so you're asking if someone's on a temporary designated street, do they have to apply?
Everyone should be. My question is, there's no one who's already in the resident parking system who would then get the temporary because they're already in the system. There's no one who would be on both. This is
correct. If year-round and it's separate. We do have ordinances that try to account for the fact that some of the year-round streets aren't 24/7 year-round streets, and that was part of this submission, where it may be allows for 2-hour parking certain times or even less. So we designated those as also October, but the residents' permits are still valid. So when enforcement goes, or police, if you have a resident permit for that area, it knows that, and it continues on.
So if you have a resident permit for Federal Street, not listed here because it's in the parking program, and you park on Lynn Street, well, that's a bad example because you can't. You park on River Street. Was River in here? River's normally on there. You park on, let me find one, Essex Street from Herbert to Webb, Boston to Monroe. Let's go with that. This is where I live, so I know it well. This is basically the library. You park Essex Street between Boston and Monroe Street. You would be fine because you already have your Federal Street permit. And so you can...
Yes, we typically honor other zones. We do want to have a discussion moving forward where we're asking people to stay in their zone.
Okay.
But we haven't, we wanted to first implement the LPR system, get people accustomed to it before we said, if you're in Zone B, that's all you could be. It doesn't grant you October. But because before it did that, we've continued that as a policy. So any resident permit is honored during October.
Any resident, so I'm Zone C, I can go drive, this is all I understand is myself, I'm sorry. This is more for me. I can drive down to the Common, any Zone C person, any Zone A person, any, can drive down to the Common and park on Washington Street.
We're not encouraging that behavior, but that has been the policy because they're residents and we have not been ticketing them. And under the old system, we did that, and we're continuing that under the new, but we do want to transition to, if you're in your zone, park in your zone. If you're in October Street, you're parking on October Streets. Because someone with an October pass, if you do the reverse, could not, should not. But again, we're not looking to, someone said it's a challenging time, so we're not looking to make it any harder for the residents, but we ask them that they, at least for their neighbors, their fellow residents, that they don't take up parking in zones that they don't necessarily have permits issued to them for.
Okay. The reason I ask this too is because I think a lot of residents don't always understand the leeway that they have during October, the value that they have from living here in October, and there's a lot more. The city isn't necessarily nickeling and diming them, trying to catch them out. It's more about folks coming in. Would that be your estimation of the point of the program?
We are trying to do that. We rescind a number of tickets. We did it under the old system. We do it under the new. Someone put in the wrong plate. We rescind the ticket for whatever reason. We're not trying to ticket residents willy-nilly. That's not the intent. It's what we are seeing over the last few years with the various things we've done. We've increased fines significantly. We are seeing more compliance in this case. I'm hearing from the police department they're not seeing as much of the visitors parking. We're also encouraging people not to come by car. I think that's a contributing factor to a certain extent. And we're also seeing people come over a longer period of time. That's why we're trying to extend the resident parking into September. So I think all of those things are contributing factors into what both parking enforcement and the police are seeing less of this. We're still issuing plenty of tickets, and I have some numbers I'm happy to share, but it has, I'll be the first to admit, it is less than other years. But again, we're looking for compliance. We want to make sure the streets are available for the residents. We don't want to have to be ticket and towing, because as you could imagine, there's only so many cars that the police can tow in a certain amount of time.
So even though the ticket revenue, or the ticket number of tickets issued during October has gone down, never mind revenue because we changed the rates, so it's hard to compare, the number of tickets issued has gone down, it's because from the police, from your division, everyone is seeing stronger compliance?
That's what we're seeing, yes.
Good, okay. I have one more question. I'll yield, I'll come back, because it's a separate thing. Well, yeah, that's all right.
Councilors King and then Councilor Merkel.
Not being a member of the committee, quick point of order. We're just discussing the item of number 139, right? We're not discussing. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify. Then I have a question. Could you, do you have any data on last year when we, kicked off at that time it was the October resident parking, like the day that we kicked it off around then? Do you have any data on how many people we towed and were like punished in some way for not complying?
Hey, I didn't bring that one. Sorry, let me see if I have it. In 2024, we towed 237 vehicles. 2023 was 293, and 2022 was 294. I don't have this last year in front of me. Apologies.
And that's for the whole month of October, probably, those numbers? Not just
Yes, that's for the month of October, yeah. And that includes October designated streets as well as year-round.
Okay.
So if a vehicle is ticketed, a visitor is ticketed on year-round street, police will call in a tow, same as they would on October Street.
Do you, could you share a little bit about the strategy that you have in your department for letting people know and kind of advertising before the temporary October resident parking goes into effect, to let people know that that's going to go into effect and that they'll need to get a temporary October resident parking pass?
So with the new system, what we do, we encourage everyone to log in and create an account so you have your email. So for those individuals, we renew their pass and we send them an email saying your permit's been renewed. if for some reason someone's moved away and there's a new resident or someone's renting, we also put out information. We've done flyers in the last year, in Spanish and English, and I think we also try to work with the mayor's office to put out the press releases. We also try to get the green signs out sooner ahead of time. That's always dependent on DPS and their availability. So a lot of times it overlaps with street sweeping, so they're really straight out with just trying to get those signs up. But we've been trying. The new system has, again, helped us to reach more people quicker via email and allows us to renew those permits automatically. So,
That's great. The ones that are on auto renew, is that also auto charging their card?
so again, the October permits are free. We're incurring, as a city, there's a cost to update it because it's going into the system and being uploaded, so there's more of a communication fee, but that's, they don't see it. The only time a resident would pay any money in October is if they chose to buy a visitor pass, and I forget what that fee is, but
$15.
yeah.
That makes sense. And then, out of curiosity, you said you've worked with the mayor's office. Have you ever tried, I mean, I know we're currently using Code Red, but whatever software would be to send text message alerts in those neighborhoods to let them know that that was coming?
That's certainly something I can explore and talk to the mayor
I think
about.
it would be, because I know, so I'm in Ward 5, and I know we have a lot of rental apartments that are, occupied by young people, especially college students, who are usually only living in that apartment for like 1 year and then they move. So a lot of them just have no idea that this policy is coming, and those are the people that I mostly get the calls about the towing, because they don't know. My other question, you mentioned that this tends to overlap with street sweeping. Would you be open to a conversation with DPW, DPS on possibly like timing street sweeping be a little earlier in the year? I don't know if that's something they'd be open to, but.
Well, if council does vote to make it September 15th, that will change the timing of when the signs will go up. So we'll work with DPS, to get them out beginning of September as opposed to end. So I think we'll be able to find a time that can work better.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Chair Varela, not being a member of the committee, and that was my question. I appreciate the information and the focus on notification, and it is good to hear that it seems like more cars are in compliance. I've also noticed a little less congestion downtown. I do think the messaging to take the train and alternate methods of transportation has been helpful, but it was just a point of clarity. I know you have the auto renew now, and hopefully now that the system's been going for a couple of years, more and more people just are under that. Is that also for the automatic renewal, not only for the year-round resident parking, but also the October, when you're just getting an October resident, is that also automatically renewed the next October, or is that different from the?
The October is renewed automatically because there's no fee.
Yeah, okay.
The year-round, we send out a notification to the residents saying your permit is about to expire. Please buy a new one if you choose to, or any visitor permits.
Because that's a fee. So
Correct.
that one, yeah, that's
Correct.
a notification. And
Yeah.
then the October one is just automatically.
Correct, but we still try to send out information.
Right.
That's why we encourage everyone to register and have a profile so that we can, any communications, again, we're hoping even to expand it at some point for other things, maybe even street sweeping. I'm not saying we're there yet, but, Passport is a strong platform. It's focused around parking. It could do other things that we're exploring, but we want to be able to communicate with as many people as possible, and we have found that pushing out these communications has helped. Not everyone, but I'd say that if more people are going online and doing it, it affords our staff more time to help those who might need a little more time to, get used to the system. So what we were finding was with everyone coming in, before it was automated this way, could be overwhelming at times, and with everything else that parking staff are, doing during this busy time of year.
Okay, so that's interesting that as the years go by and more people are registering, that will create, a mechanism for better notification.
That's the
in
hope.
in other areas. Okay,
That is the hope, yeah.
that's interesting.
Councilor Sidoriak and then Councilor Jarowski.
Thank you, Chair. I was not a member of the committee. So for those that are not automatically renewed and are then not renewed because they don't pay, what is the follow-up for that? Are they just non-compliant until you stumble upon them being parked there? Or do you actually pursue to ensure that they're compliant, or maybe they're not parked there anymore?
So you're referring to a year-round person. If someone, for whatever reason, forgets and we've issued them a ticket, if they, reach out to us and renew their permit, we rescind the ticket. So that's been our policy to do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilor Jarowski.
Thank you, Chair, for not being a member of the committee. I have a quick question first. Mr. Kucharski, could you please clarify the manufacturer of the automated license plate readers?
Passport works with Genetec. It's not Flock Safety, which I know has been in the news lately. We did confirm that, so it is a different company. Yeah.
Thank you. And then my more pertinent question is, prior to the 2023 revisions, I think we were seeing like half of the number of visitor passes and the number of resident permits issued were roughly similar. Do you know if that's changed at all since we switched over to the new $10 visitor passes compared to how many resident permits were issued, if it has?
So for 2025, we issued about 2,375 resident permits, year-round ones. And in that same year, 2025, there were a little over 1,300 visitor permits. I'd say it's maybe slightly less in the visitor permits. You may recall we also removed, I think it was like 25 streets from the program while we were making some of these other changes where we were seeing very low utilization. People just weren't buying the permits, but the signs were up. So I think that's another contributing factor, but I think the price increases made people just maybe buy one visitor pass as opposed to two, but I'd have to dig into that a little more.
Thank you. Yeah, I think one of the biggest pain points that we're hearing is that it's very difficult to have visitors registered correctly. So I just wanted to get an idea for the scope of how many people were affected by that. Thank you.
Councilors King and then Councilor Laba.
Not being a member of the committee, I just note, speaking from experience as someone who lives on a resident-only year-round street, we used to buy both visitor passes every year just to have the placards, and then once it switched over to the system, we just stopped buying visitor passes altogether and gave up on the system because it's like one of those things where we bought the placards just to have them, and then when it turned into having to track people's license plate numbers, it became too hard, and we live close enough to Forest Park that we just started sending people there. So that's just one anecdote on that note.
Councilor Laba.
Thank you, Chair Varela. I'm not trying to open up a can of worms with this question, and so if we get too off the rails, I'll shut up. But I was wondering if either Director, you could, or another counselor could give me an argument for why all of these streets that we're designating as temporary resident, why we don't just designate them as year-round resident parking. It seems to me that we'd save a bunch of time on putting signs up. I hear maybe some discussions about like visitor passes, and maybe this other item about guest passes is more relevant there. And the other thing that we heard at the last council, last year when we removed, or when the last council removed, excuse me, tired. When the last council removed the minimum parking requirement for new buildings, one of the things that we heard from residents, and I've heard from residents, is that they're worried about new developments going up because they're worried that even though they won't have the spaces in those new buildings, the people are going to try to have their cake and eat it too. They're going to move to those buildings knowing they don't have street parking, or knowing they don't have off-street parking because the development didn't build it, and then go and park in some of these neighborhoods, and we have no protections for that. I am painfully aware of our housing crisis. This seems like an opportunity where we can sort of like protect the residents year-round. Say, look, we're going to make sure you have parking. It doesn't matter 5 years from now if a new building comes up. We're going to kind of get the system in place. And I think we could remove that argument from a lot of people when we talk about housing, and give people a chance to make sure that they're able to park in their neighborhood. So I guess that's the thing that I've never been, I don't live downtown, so maybe there's obvious things that I'm missing, but I would appreciate education in that manner.
So, Councilor Jalapa, I can speak a little bit to that, specifically on Derby Street. So during October, the October parking is a little more of like an aggressive blanket of most streets. So what it effectively does is it'll restrict streets that neither don't have actual metered or resident parking, and that it makes it a little more difficult. It's very aggressive. So I would say that that could be problematic for some of our areas that have businesses because of the flexibility of the regular season. Having people able to be able to park even on Derby Street would be problematic with that. Councilor Smith, did you still want to speak? And then Councilor Tarowski.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of streets that are listed here, if something has just daytime resident parking, let's say, and this would restrict it overnight, would that street be added? Would you expect that street to be added? So it's a year-round resident, daytime, no parking, and at night after 5, it's allowed. You're allowed to park there year-round. Would you expect that to be added to the October?
Depends on where it's located.
It's Warren Street between Essex and Flint, So actually, it's Pine, Essex and South Pine, because I think it starts at South Pine here. Let me make sure. Flint to Pickering. No, so it's Warren Street between, Essex and Flint. That's a daytime parking zone. I know they've had some issues in the past, so they brought it up to me about 6 months ago, but it popped in my head just now. Good timing.
That'd be something I can bring before the commission for discussion. I'm not.
We shouldn't amend this right now. I know we can, but we shouldn't in your.
I'd want to look at some more data before amending it, sorry.
I'll send that one to you. No, that's all right. I was just asking if that were the case. And then one more thing. The garage. You and I have discussed this at length. If you want to give me an answer in the future, that's fine. I had mentioned about starting that a little bit earlier, if there was any possibility of doing that. I know I'm putting you on the spot, so I'm happy to take the answer elsewhere and later. But this is before us right now, and so I do want to mention that. I think I gave you a heads up on that.
Yes, and that was part of that First Amendment, included it for the roof. As I've noted, we're not even seeing full usage of those spaces during October when we've issued them. So we worked with council to limit the number of permits for the roof to 50, but I had discretion to issue more. I think last year we issued close to 75, and we had enforcement just because they have to make sure that no one else is parking in there. At no time did we see more than 30, 35 vehicles there. That includes on October. So I've also discussed this with the mayor, that essentially is costing revenue for the city. If we're selling these at $115, but we're finding is that in some cases, not all, a resident will use it just as insurance to get into the garage, and the first open space they see, they will take, leaving that space that, yes, they paid $115 for, but that could be, or there's times where during the day, which is usually when it occurs, is when we have to close the garage, but we're closing it with upwards of 40 spaces that are empty on the roof at times. It's not all the time, but, so I would say that we're not seeing the level to warrant extending that time period, and that's why we didn't do it for this particular amendment.
I did have anecdotal evidence from last year of people not being able to park because of that food truck festival at the end of September. It's that last weekend before October. And so that is what the concern is. And I'm wondering if if we can look at how much revenue would be lost with just changing that by a week, but we've discussed that. If you've already discussed it further, and we can talk about that elsewhere. I don't want to hold up the time, but thank you.
Sure. Councilor Strowski.
Thank you, Chair Varela. Not being a member of the committee, I wanted to go back and answer Councilor Jalapa's question, which is a good one, which is why don't we do this year-round instead of just in October or September? And if I can send you the link for this, it's something that we discussed in Transportation Commission within the past 2 years. But like if you look at Zone F right now, the only street in Zone F, which includes the Point and some of the stuff behind the Babe, the only street in there that's actual year-round parking is Ropes Street. The entire rest of the neighborhood and the Point is not resident parking year-round. And a big reason for that is because a lot of the vehicles are not locally registered. A lot of them are leased. A lot of them are from people who lease them from Uber or drive them for rideshare. So if we had year-round resident parking, none of those people would be able to register for it. So that's an exception that the city makes just for October to try to make it easier for people who live in very dense areas near downtown especially. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Mr. Kucharski.
So there is if we were to designate some of those streets, we do have a path for folks who don't have their car registered here to purchase it. It's a higher fee, but again, there's a cost associated with it. And those streets are all designated as October streets. Yeah.
Councilor King.
I'm curious, so for the streets that are further out of downtown on this list, I'm thinking Fairfield Street, Gardner Street, Hancock Street, so we're like practically Salt at that point. Those types of streets, can you explain the reasoning behind an October, just the October parking, temporary parking, resident-only parking on those streets? Is it because of the tourists? Is it did we at one point see the tourists parking out that far?
We were seeing that to an extent. We were also hearing from the councilors at the time when we were redoing this, and we were trying to create it. Just to reiterate, the October parking is only in effect Monday through Friday, beginning at 5 p.m. to 7 a.m., and Saturday and Sunday from 12 p.m. to 7 a.m. Because in addition to hearing from the residents, we were also hearing from school teachers, people going to doctor's appointments, religious institutions. So we came up with these hours to be more targeted when we knew necessarily residents would be coming home from work or shopping or whatever, and we wanted to try to ensure that these areas were clear for them to be able to park in their neighborhoods. And it also afforded the other people who just park during the day, who were just doing regular business, whether they're a resident or not, are able to. So
that's great. Would you be open, or would this be a huge pain I know we're talking about the September 15th and November 1st for all of these streets as one lump sum, but for so many of them, I think so many are impacted by things like the food truck festival and things that are like leaking into September. I will say for those streets that are further out from downtown, I do question whether or not those streets are experiencing as much of the September rush, and I'm wondering, would you be open to, for a select group of streets that are further from downtown, keeping the start date at October 1st? Or would that be a logistical nightmare? You can tell me it would be a logistical nightmare if it would. I'm just curious.
It would certainly have some challenges, because now you're talking about two different types of signage, putting out two different communications. It's not impossible, but our preference is to have it more streamlined. And then also, which streets are that discussion in and of itself is deciding who gets and who doesn't. I'm sure, as you know from our recent survey that we did, you were probably going to get 5 different answers. So that's why we're just trying to keep it consistent for the sake of rolling it out and everything else.
And I think there's value in the clarity of having like one start date. Like that would be my concern, right? It is a balance, right? I understand that. So, okay, thank you.
Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just add, just for context, the list in front of us is the result of many, many years of refining by the Transportation Department, but it's also the result of many, many years of councilors adding streets. And I think every time we open this up, some changes requested by a ward councilor. Not to say that's a bad thing. I'm saying that all of you, if you have questions about this list, if you'd like to see something added, if you don't believe something is correct in here, you would not be the first ward councilors to make an adjustment to this over time. But I think probably the point of like, let's keep it consistent, because I think residents get, understandably get confused about this policy sometimes. So as consistent as possible, I think that's probably better. And then one more point just about Councilor Halapa's question just about the year-round nature of this. I think generally probably people who have resident-only parking wouldn't choose it if they didn't have to have it. So I think just, as we'll see later, the next order that comes up here, it can be an administrative burden just for a resident to go through the process, and hopefully we can adjust that and change that. But I think most people would not choose resident-only parking if they didn't have to. And for many of these streets, it's not an issue outside of October. Thanks.
Okay. Any more comments from councilors before I open it up for public comment? Seeing none. All right, so we'll take public comment, and just for everyone's clarity, this is about the October resident parking for public comment. Again, if you're on Zoom, we will attempt to hear you, so be patient with us. Anyone in the room? Nope, all right. Okay, Mr. Laffey, go ahead and try to speak.
Hi, Phil Laffey, 143 Ford Avenue. I assume that you can hear me. My favorite, unfavorite subject, parking. Regarding October, a couple comments. I know these are comments and you're not going to answer me. If these are automatically renewed for October temporary parking, if someone moves, are you giving thought as to how
Mr. Laffey, can you start over, please?
Sure, I can. Phil Laffey, 143 Ford Avenue. My favorite, unfavorite subject, which is parking. Regarding the auto renewal of temporary resident parking, are we giving thought, and I know this is comment, not a question, are we giving thought as to who we are automatically renewing? Because if we are automatically renewing somebody that moves maybe out of Salem, we are then spending $1.25 for that pass for somebody that no longer lives there, and then can come to Salem during October and park for free. The other question, or the other comment that I'll make regarding Councilor Halapa's question about costs, some of the October parking is being subsidized by the city, but it's also being subsidized by the year-round resident parking people. And that was demonstrated when this topic came up in 2024. It costs the city about $30,000 for the temporary October parking, which is fully subsidized, some of which comes out of the full year folks, and some of it comes out of the city. And that was demonstrated by FOIA requests and so on. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Laffey. Mr. Whittier, you can speak. Go ahead, Justin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to make a brief comment. There was a suggestion that most people in resident parking zones wouldn't choose it if they had the opportunity at this point. And I just want to say that in my experience, that is that's 180 degrees opposed to what I know. I have been president of a neighborhood association for 10 years, despite my efforts to get out of it. And nothing in my experience suggests that that is remotely true. So I just wanted to offer that up to you to consider. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Whittier. Anyone else from Zoom land would like to speak about the October resident parking? Seeing none? All right, so back to the council. It seems like there isn't any amendments or changes to this document. As we all know, this has already been for first passage, so this will go for second passage. Does anyone want to add any amendments to this document, or are we going to go forward as presented? presented here. Councilor Smith.
I'd like to know if we amend this in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, actually after the next transportation meeting, which is the last Wednesday of this month, I believe, we would have time to do that before. This is actually a question over here. We would have time to do that prior to you needing to have October parking locked. Because I know you weren't able to meet this week with the Transportation Commission.
The question is, you want me to bring back to the commission the rooftop for discussion?
The Warren Street ad.
Oh, Warren Street, sorry.
And the rooftop discussion, but yes, both. My question is just really realistically, does this need to be locked this week? Meaning, can we amend this in 4 weeks?
So Warren Street could be treated as an order, which we had already submitted, Hawthorne Boulevard, Essex, Derby, and Chestnut. I could just submit an order if you'd want for that particular
if you
street.
It's appropriate.
I'll have to look into it, but I'll let you know on that piece, and so.
But we can. You don't need this done Thursday. Like locked for October. This Thursday. We're bringing this very early. It's 8.
Ideally, the sooner I can get the extension passed, the sooner I can have the signs ordered. That's one thing. And again, Warren Street can be treated separately as an order. If you're seeking the rooftop, again, I've discussed it with the mayor. He's expressed he's not in favor of pursuing that based on information I've provided to him from past years when we have had it in place in October. If we're not seeing the demand in October, we are not looking at extending it beyond that. So.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, under discussion. Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I guess, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think it would be best to have this as locked as possible by Thursday, correct?
I mean, you can pass this, and there's nothing that says we can't come back and amend it again.
Nothing stopping the board from bringing a future order forward to amend the ordinance that we just touched a little.
That is correct.
That's probably not good form ideally, but if you do find something you're able to you want to change between after this goes for second passage, you could theoretically bring it back. It's just delaying their ability to get these things out. I think it would be best if we get the second passage on Thursday, just given the time frames that we have in front of us, or even just do due diligence between today and Thursday if you can, and add anything you want to. We can do it on the floor if needed. But thank you.
All right, under discussion. Can I entertain a motion? Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to refer to the full council with a recommendation for second and final passage.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Presnewski. So Councilor Hapworth moves for favorable recommendation for second final passage, seconded by Councilor Presnewski. All those in favor from the committee? Let the record show I have seen 4 hands plus my own. The matter carries. Thank you, guys. All right, let's move on. So now we have the fun one here. Number 148, meet to discuss implementation of resident sticker visitor passes. This is a late file from Councilor Presnewski. I'm going to let you take away.
Thank you. I didn't even have to raise my hand. I'll fall on the sword real quick. Actually, not falling on the sword. I'm just repeating a lot of concerns that I've had about the way that it's implemented right now, which is strictly with the license plate readers. Back not too long ago, before we had the license plate readers, we had the placard system where we bought a sticker for residents to have on their cars year-round. And with that sticker, you had the option of buying 1 or 2 visitor passes, which you were given 1 or 2 placards. So the parking enforcement people, as they drove down the street, would see the sticker on the car, and if the car didn't have a sticker, they looked for the placard, and if the placard wasn't there, then they would tag the car because the car was neither a resident or a visitor. That was put away for the new system, which is with the license plate reader, which now you don't need a sticker for, and you don't need placards. It simply drives by, and the license plate reader makes the determination whether or not that vehicle belongs on that street as a resident or a visitor. And there's just been a lot of complaints about how that system is not working. Because in order for the system to work correctly or easily, the responsibility is on the resident who lives on that street, who has the parking permit, to call in license plates or to go on their computer and register their visitor, which adds a whole new dimension as to how difficult it is to be able to do that. There's been many incidences where somebody has just dropped by a residence, whether it's a healthcare worker, Meals on Wheels, or just somebody driving by and dropping in for a few minutes. And what I understand the rules are is that you have to call a timeout, and the resident has to call a timeout and say, I don't have a placard anymore to give you. I have to call in your license plate number, even if they're there just for a few minutes. And people get ticketed because they were quick visitors. It's not easy to do. I've tried it myself, and maybe because of my age, it's maybe a little bit more difficult with my phone or on my computer, but people come and go. I mean, some people don't have visitors, some people have visitors that come and go, and it's just really, it's impossible to put time on hold to say to the person, if you're going to stay here more than a minute, or what I do is let's talk outside so that if the enforcement comes by, I can say you're a visitor. I have 2 parking permits, but I don't have placards to give them. It was just so much easier when we had placards to do that rather than having to call in. I've gotten a lot of complaints, emails, some of them being some real horror stories. I think you may even hear some tonight with some of the people that were here. One person that's not here, a woman who lives on the corner of West Ave and West Terrace, she wrote a letter, Jen Berenbach, who stated that she's having work done on her house, and she can't get visitor passes for the contractors. She was told that she has to pay $15 per day per contractor to do the work that she needs done on her house. Well, she did the math because she's redoing the house. And for her to do it legally, it's going to cost her $9,600 in parking permits to have a contractor come to the house and work on her house. She's a resident. She's not a non-resident, she's a resident. Which I did not know that at the time, so I figured I would bring that up. Maybe Mr. Kucharski can explain whether there's an alternative way for some relief for her. My own personal experience was I was cleaning my gutters a month ago, and my son, who lives in Swampscott, dropped by to hold the ladder for me. He parked in front of my driveway. I went up on the ladder. He held it while I cleaned my gutters on one side of my house. And when I got done, I came down the ladder, and he had a ticket on his car, which kind of frosted me because his car was parked in front of my driveway. Whoever issued him the ticket saw that there were people in the driveway, but just indiscriminately just gave out a ticket. 40 years in the police department, if somebody that worked for me in patrol had the audacity to do that without doing this much investigation, I consider that rude, really rude. That's not doing your job right. That's not customer service. The other part of it is, and I don't know whether you have the data for this, Mr. Kucharski, how much money was collected in resident zones from people who were non-residents? Because people who are residents are paying for tickets for their visitors. When they get a ticket because they didn't have a placard to give, the visitor says, I have a ticket on my car. They say, okay, give me the ticket. I'll try to, if I have a visitor pass, it gets taken care of. Again, you have to make a phone call, you have to go down to the office instead of just hanging a tag. The money that was collected, is it from residents or is it from non-residents? I don't know whether we have any data on that. All I'm saying, to wrap it all up in a nutshell, is that this system that we have now is very, very difficult for people to use. And I think that there's some way that we could combine the two systems to make something work that would be a lot more palatable and a lot more easy to do. So I'm frustrated because I hear the complaints all the time, and I've been personally a victim of trying to do things right, and it's just very, very difficult to navigate. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Presnowski. So I'll quickly say that, I understand that we have to modernize how we do things here in the city. And I think what this discussion will be about and should be about, to be productive here, is accommodating that special situation we have for special instances, contractors, nurses, certain instances. I personally think that moving to all modernization is a step in the right direction, but obviously, as you can see, there's some fallout with that, and I think that we need to discuss some flexibilities with this program. So with that, Councilor Hepworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to also just appreciate the comments about potentially combining the systems. And just to take a step back, just to give some context, going back, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or more, we started having conversations about one of the biggest complaints we were all getting was around enforcement, that we just did not have enough. We had, our parking enforcement were working hard. We just did not have enough out there. Like, if you looked at what they had to enforce throughout the city, there was no possible way on the hours that they were given that they were able to do what they needed to do out there. And that was the first piece of frustration. I know one of the conversations we had early back then was like, couldn't we get license plate readers like other communities are doing? And that was sort of the North Star that we looked towards. When we implemented this, there's not, I think, when we look back at that, and also there were conversations around the guest passes and abuses around the guest passes. We as a city council didn't change an ordinance to, we did change the ordinance, I think, slightly probably, but there's not anything in our ordinance that states using a license plate reader or not using a license plate reader, or having placards or not having placards. I don't think there's anything that we would do here, unless we wanted to get creative on the city council about changing an ordinance. This is mostly, as I understand it, and Mr. Kucharski, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think mostly, as I understand it, this is, if we don't appreciate the way that this is being done right now, this is us showing our displeasure right now. Potentially, there's an avenue. Anyone could write a change to the ordinance to actually very clearly state what we want in there and don't want in there. But this came through the city council as a funding request, I believe, for the program of the license plate reader that we voted in favor of 3 or 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, whenever that was. That having been said, I think that we are looking at, I think there are positives in enforcement right now that have come out of this, for sure. I think that we're seeing far less people parking in resident zones that shouldn't be there. I think that enforcement is light years faster than it was a few years ago. I think that is definitely a positive. The visitor pass situation, I think, is one that is a very valid complaint, and I don't think I've talked to a single resident who appreciates the way these visitor passes are being done. I'm sure it is easier on the Department of Transportation. I'm sure it's logical, but it's difficult for someone who's technologically savvy to navigate. I can't imagine people who are not right now. So I think there's probably some thought right now, and I'd love to hear more conversation around keeping the license plate readers for residents. If I can go on and register my car one time, or I can work with the transportation department to get my car registered, then it's done, and I don't have to do it again until I change my license plate or change my car. Having to do it every single time someone comes in, I think I look at a situation where the license plate reader goes down, it beeps, they get out of the car, they see the placard sitting there, they don't write the ticket. It will add time to their day. It will add time to the transportation department to issue those placards. It will add costs to buy those placards. But I think that seems like a reasonable place to sort of drive this conversation. But just wanted to give that background for folks.
All right, under discussion, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Do you happen to have in front of you, Mr. Kucharski, the cost of the license plate reader program versus the cost of the paper program and plastic program?
So I have estimates, which also accounts for enforcement personnel and the percentage of times we received a lot of pushback on some of these numbers. So under the old system, it was about, for a year, issuing the permits, about 240,000. And with the new system, about 269,000 plus, so a difference of about 26,000. Again, those were looking at, we have staff stipend for, folks who work directly with inputting. They did it under the old system and the new system. Staff time just, being on the phone, including myself, coming to meetings to talk about resident parking, checking out when there's issues, when there's requests for new streets, going out and doing surveying. So all that's, again, estimated in here. And then there's obviously the October time, and then the cost of the permits as well. And then the visitor passes, and again, as I said, enforcement and miscellaneous, there's, licensing fees. So that's essentially the two costs. At the time it has changed. We know more, streets were taken away, so it's not exact, but.
Okay, so it's but we spend like $250,000 for people to park near their home.
Again, if you agree that we're factoring staff time, then yes.
Okay. Can, in your estimation, we do a hybrid system where the license plate reader picks up, I don't even know how this would work. I guess it would pick up the resident, but then the person would get out of the car because it would say no, and then they'd have to check and see if they have a placard. So it would be like a two-step system. What would that do to the parking system that we now pay for and implement if we had a visitor placard and a resident digital?
Well, so if it's a vehicle, because again, we have handhelds, but if a vehicle goes down the street that's resident permit and it pings a number of times, the enforcement person has to get out anyway and then start issuing the ticket to the correct car. But what they'll have to do now is check every single vehicle to see if they have something physical on the windshield. That just takes time. I think everyone could agree that would take more time. Then there's the costs associated with buying the placards themselves. It's not a high cost, but it is a cost. And then how are we getting these to the residents? Are they coming in, or are we mailing them? If we're mailing them, that's more money that the city is spending to get these out. If people are coming in, which is what we were dealing with, it distracts staff from doing other duties. So there's a trade-off if we're going to have this system. So the hybrid system won't work as what the LPR system is intended. It'll add more time, and it will have some costs associated with it. Getting back to, if I can just, that one instance, I was on those emails of that resident with the contractors. Your street is designated as resident permit parking. You were given 2 visitor placards. It sounds like she's going to have 6 or 7 contractors there at any one time. Even with the physical placards, that wouldn't make a difference. You'd have 2 vehicles. I've indicated that, again, we wouldn't be holding on, we would rescind any ticket that was issued in error. But what we have found is when we don't address that, we hear from the other neighbors saying, why is this car parked here? And when we explain to them that they paid a fee, then they know that they're putting into the system. So it's not perfect. If the residents on the street want to all come to an agreement and say, our neighbor's going to have their house worked on for X months, we don't need, there's things we can do. We've removed it from certain streets. We've removed it from 25 streets. I have a meeting this Wednesday with the mayor and the chief of police to get police more involved outside of October, so that if you don't want it during the day, but want to have it in the evenings. But in order to do that, the police have to be involved because we don't have staff in the evening. So if a street doesn't feel they need it during the day, don't have to. We have seasonal now. The Willows, if there's only certain months out of the year. So there's other things that can be done. But again, going to a hybrid system, we looked into it. It's not something we found any other community does because it has that added time and cost. It's possible to do, but again, it will be like a step backwards in my opinion. So,
Councilor King? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Last thing. Is there anything stopping me from purchasing 2 physical placards and giving them to somebody 365 days a year?
Is there anything stopping
Yeah,
you?
just somebody that don't live in Salem, and I just want them to be able to park anywhere they want in my resident zone any day, and I have the physical placard, can I sell it?
You mean under the old system?
Yeah, if I go back to the old system, can I just buy one of those for $20 and sell it to somebody year-round? They can park in Salem, maybe I get $100 for it.
Well, the placards were based on zones, so they had a certain color.
Yeah.
And what we did was we wrote the plate of the resident who was getting them, so you knew it was associated with a specific plate. We've heard instances of where people were reusing them. We've heard instances where people left and the resident didn't have it anymore. They had to get it back or they lost it. So there were some shortcomings with the physical permits as well. If someone were to leave and they had it with them, you're down a permit. And again, if someone got a ticket because you didn't have it, you couldn't give it to them. Or let's say they couldn't find parking on your block, but they parked a block away and they have to meet you to get the placard, and a ticket gets issued in that time. I'm not saying there's other things that happen with the old system. That system wasn't perfect. This system now isn't perfect either, but we feel it's better to administer, it's better to help us with enforcement. So that was our...
My question was just if there was fraud. Right.
We had some cases of it. I don't have specific details, but...
Very good. Councilor King.
Thank you, not being a member of the committee. I have a couple things. I will just note, because Jen is a constituent of mine, and I was also on those threads. First of all, thank you, because I know you were very much trying to find a solution that would work for them in this specific case. So I do really appreciate that. And the willingness to rescind any tickets that they might get. I will just note, I don't think that in this case, constituents, I think the constituents understood that like 5 or 6 construction vehicles wasn't going to be free. I don't think they were planning to put it on their resident parking pass or their visitor parking placards. I think that they were more surprised by the sticker shock of the $15 per day per vehicle. I think they anticipated it would be like $30 a year per vehicle and something like that, which I think is reasonable given that like residents pay that. I think that was more the source of the sticker shock at that number. So I just wanted to clarify that. But I have a couple, I'll just do some things, then I'll let other people talk, and then I have more things. But with the Passport parking app, I'm curious about the level of flexibility that you have on the back end to kind of modify it. I have 2 suggestions. One of them is, I know we do auto renew for the seasonals, and I know that there's a good reason to not auto enroll someone in auto renew for the non-seasonals because that it costs money, so you don't want to auto enroll them in it. could we add a checkbox to opt yourself into auto renewal for the year-round resident parking? Because I have, without fail, gotten a ticket every single year because I always forget to renew it. Just a good example. And I'm usually on top of things, so like I'm sure other people are experiencing that. And I did not know I could repeal that, so that's really cool. I should have appealed those tickets, but I didn't. So we'll talk about that later. But that's my first suggestion. And then my second one is for the people, I really, a lot of what Councilor Presniewski said about, the placards are easier, all that, I get that. But I do actually have a lot of constituents who actually really try really hard to use the digital visitor system. And one suggestion I received, right now the digital visitor system, when you put in a new license plate, it wipes the old license plate. Like, so if you had your daughter visits you and then your son's visiting you, you got to delete your daughter's license plate and put in your son's license plate. If we could add the functionality to have saved license plate numbers, so you could have a friendly name for it. So this is son's license plate, this is daughter's, and that this is grandma's, and this is visiting nurse. And then you could just check the box for which one is using it that day. That I think would make it a lot easier to use. I have residents who, I have this, she literally pulled up her spreadsheet for me. They have a spreadsheet that they keep on their home computer that has all 8 license plates that sometimes use it, and they're copying and pasting it in each time. And if it just had a save license plate shortlist option, I think that would be really helpful. Okay, those were my suggestions on that. And then I also have, just because it's top of mind, could you talk a little bit about both the logic behind, for contractors, the logic behind the 15, and I know we've talked about this over email but I think it's helpful for other people to hear, the logic behind the $15 per day per vehicle per contractors, and then could you also talk about, because I know it's been mentioned that there's some way for visiting nurses and home health care workers to have a separate pass. Can you explain those processes to folks?
So the $15 per day for contractors started mainly for contractors working in the downtown and required us to bag metered spaces. And that's sort of the typical rate for if someone to park in a lot of our spaces all day. That has been used for resident permit streets as well. It was just a rate. It's been in place since before I started, but I think it's for more short-term types of, a couple days. We haven't heard, at least I haven't heard significant pushback for that, and I don't know how frequently you might say it happens in a year. With the caregivers, when we moved to this new system, that was one of the things that council wanted to make sure we could address, not just for year-round, but for October. And what we do is, if we hear from a resident or directly from some type of hospice office, we will populate those plates into the system so that the caregivers can, park. We do it for a lot of them, the majority are for October, because we expand the number of streets. But we have done it in cases, if a resident reaches out, we put it in the system.
Does it get put in the system as one of their visitor passes, or do you do an override to basically give them an extra visitor for the visiting?
It's like an override.
Okay. Thank you. Would you ever be...
There's no fee.
Yeah, and I realize this is not technically in front of us, but I guess it's a general conversation, but would you ever be open to making that $15 per day per vehicle for contractors have a narrower radius, so it really is just impacting downtown, since that's really where it's meant to be impacted?
We could certainly revisit that. I could look at the numbers of how often we are getting requests on resident streets and come back with a number that makes more sense for those particular areas.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And I will say, I would bet that some of these contractors are just eating the tickets, right? I don't know if you're going to have data on how often that's definitely happening. I would bet, the parking enforcement doesn't come around all the time, so they were just taking it and then eating the tickets and not appealing them, probably. Okay, thank you.
May I comment on the other, please? So with the auto renew, that would require a credit card or something to be on file. I'd have to check on that, and also with the pre-populating. I know one of the complaints is that we're taking too much information. So I think that's one reason why we don't. hold on to that, but I can talk to Passport and see if that is an option, but I feel that's one reason we're not holding on to this information. It's the resident puts the plate number in of their friend or whoever, and then it's not there once they put in the next one.
Yeah, I would imagine, I think if it's possible to make it an optional system, I think that would help solve that, so they don't have to save the car. They could just, they could opt out of saving the car. I would make the automatically save the car, but they could opt out of it. I know Passport still has like my car from like 10 years ago in that app, so I would hope they'd be able to save it, but I don't know. It's probably different for the resident systems. And then I have one more question, then I'll let other people talk, and then I'll do my other questions later. I am curious about the training documents or like walkthrough videos. Have you guys ever considered, because I know I've had enough, I know that we have a lot of people who, there's a full barrier of like they don't have a computer or a phone, which that is a huge additional issue. It's a smaller group of people, but that is a big issue. But there's also lots of people who do have access and are just really struggling because it's not the most intuitive portal. I know I've struggled with it. And I know that they can go into the office at any point and talk to someone on your team, but I know for many people, that's a huge hurdle to come over. So would your team consider ever making like a how-to guide with like pictures and graphics, or like a video where it could just literally be like a screen recording of someone being, okay, so this is how I make a resident thing and this is how I make a visitor thing? Because I've had a few residents where I basically just ended up getting on the phone with them. Well, they were on the computer and I did it, which I know your team would do as well, but like,
We have done that as well.
I know you can, but it's more like, I just think having a handy like self-service guide that especially like family members who are trying to help someone could find it and send it. Like, I just think something like that hosted on the website would be really helpful.
I could look into developing something.
I'll pause for now, let up.
Thank you. One second, guys. So I had a question. If, let's say, a resident with mobility issues or that's severely handicapped needs to get a resident parking permit, is there the opportunity for them to actually call the office and one of your staff can actually walk that person through?
Yes.
Or do it almost for them?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Guys, get your hands up again. So it's going to be, whoa, guys. All right, we're going to go to Councilor Tarowski first, and then Jalapa, and then we'll see where we're at.
Thank you, Chair Varela, not being a member of the committee. This is a little bit off the cuff, so pardon me if it sounds a little odd, but would it be possible to put something, the police might keep me mad at this, but we're going to go there anyway, to put something over the license plate while the car is parked that obscures it, and then you could have like the placard be a replica of the resident's parking, the license plate, so that when the car goes by, it reads the replica plate. This might be like funny, but that would save the enforcement officer the step of getting out of the car. Like I said, it's off the cuff.
I'm trying to picture what you're, can you say it again? I'm sorry.
The car goes by, right? It reads the license plate, it doesn't recognize, it dings. What if it doesn't see that license plate? Well, like what if instead of handing out a placard, you instruct the visitor to cover their license plate and put this thing that looks like a license plate, but it's obviously not, but it's something that the reader can recognize as a license plate number?
So instead of a placard that goes in the windshield,
put something like
something that goes on
the back of the car. I don't, just spitballing here.
I'm not certain of the legality of something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would assume that covering your license plate is a big no-no.
Obstructing a license plate is under mass.
Councilor Jalapa, you're good.
Thank you, Chair Varela. That's interesting. I want to put a pin in that for a moment. I think what you're suggesting is, I think what the suggestion from the Ward 2 Councilor hypothetically is that there is just something else that these license plate readers can detect and use as information to save a step. So I don't know necessarily we'd have to cover the license plate to do that. It might just be we'd probably run tests with the cameras. It's like, if there's two things, will it recognize one of them, or would that flag the whole thing as a false? So the covering aside thing, there might be something there. I want to put another pin in something so I fully understand just the scope of what we're talking about with resident parking. You had a number earlier about $250,000 for a cost to, what was that exactly? Could you reiterate that?
Well, we did an estimate of the current expenses at the time under the old system and the projections of what the new system costs would be.
Okay, so those are those numbers based off of 1 year in particular, right? That was
Yes.
from some real numbers.
Yeah.
Do you have the corresponding revenue from that program for that year?
Again, at that time, the current revenue under the old system was about 45 grand. With the proposed changes that we were showing with the rate increases at the time, and not all the rate increases went was 145,000. But I would note that, there was a shortfall we were showing under with the revenue. So under the current system, we were spending more on the program than we were bringing in.
And just from, if I heard those numbers correctly, it's anywhere from $200,000 to $100,000 is what that deficit was, depending if it's at 49.
Yeah, based on the numbers I presented at that time, the shortfall was about 197,000 under the current system at that time. And with the proposed changes that we were proposing, it was still about 124,000. Again, there was a lot of contention about what we were suggesting was part of the service, but those are the numbers.
And I can understand that. And just for my clarity again, where does that budget deficit come from? Where does that get filled? Who's paying for it?
I would say it comes from the general population. Again, yeah, any money that comes in through parking goes back to the general fund. It doesn't come to our department, so it's...
So would it be an accurate statement to say that the people that are benefiting from that part of the system are not paying for it fully?
I mean, technically, we can only charge for what the service costs, but it comes down to what we're counting as part of the service. When you have a certain percentage of the city that are getting this particular permit, that others are not, I would say we're not always capturing the full cost.
Sure. And even without the enforcement and the permitting and the placards and things, the folks that don't have those are still on the streets that are getting swept and maintained, and that comes at a similar cost. Just interesting information. Thank you.
All right, hands up, guys. All right, so it's going to be Councilor Davis and then Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Chair. Not being a member of the committee, I wanted to follow up on the cost comparison questions. So it sounded like both of those numbers, both cost and revenue, are from past years. But since, is that correct?
Yes.
All that right? So since implemented, do we know the revenue? Because I'm imagining, if from what you're saying, the effectiveness of the enforcement has shot up significantly. So I would imagine more revenue?
Well, we're not issuing more tickets, and that was never accounted for. Tickets were not part of the revenue because it's not. Again, we're not basing getting our money back based on writing tickets. We want compliance. We want people who ask for a resident permit to be able to park on their street and pay for their permits. And when we go down the street, if someone is not supposed to be there, we issue them a ticket. But the ultimate goal is for compliance. So that's why tickets were not part of that calculus that we did, the calculation.
Okay, but just in terms of a cost comparison, I mean, the money that we get in from tickets does, in a sense, help to pay for the program, right?
Perhaps. I'd have to look at the numbers since we, changed everything. The expenses were factoring enforcement time of an individual going down a street that had resident permit parking that may not otherwise have gone down that particular street, as opposed to, because that also fluctuates too. So the short answer, I'd have to go back and take a look, and that would take some time.
Yeah, I think those numbers would be helpful. I think I have a similar curiosity about the money where, just kind of a larger lens here of just the amount that we're subsidizing car drivers for the system. So that'd be interesting. Thank you.
Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Chair Varela, not being a member of the committee. And I want to say thank you to Dave for your time and all the information. I appreciate it here. And also, I do want to recognize that any change in processes is difficult and challenging for residents. You know, things I'm not that technically savvy, and I find it hard to keep up in general with everything, you know, that managing through day-to-day life, it gets more challenging. And I recognize that and feel that myself. I do. For context and clarity, I'd like to offer to the point that was made that the visitor parking program isn't available to all residents, as was pointed out. It's roughly 14% of Salem residents have access to 2 year-round visitor permits, and in October it's basically 29%. And the other people that, you know, don't have the option to opt in to visitor parking don't always live where there's a lot of free, ample parking. You know, full disclosure, I'm downtown and I don't have access to visitor parking, and I am near parking garages and lots, but they can often be full. So just want to put that context on that it is not, you know, a program for all residents. And also hearing all the really good points that were made and really good questions. Running two systems, like bringing back the old system, like you said, of printing and issuing, you know, paper, you know, placards, and still running a new system seems really impractical. You know, trying to run two systems, you know, more costly, it would be more time consuming for staff, certainly, and just, you know, not very practical. What I really appreciated was the focus on problem solving that I heard tonight. You know, addressing some, you know, from Councilor King, you know, improvement in auto renew systems, options for opt-in for people that keep registering, you know, the same family members, thinking about contractors, thinking about, you know, visiting nurses. I appreciated all of this, and taking the time, you know, which my conversations for these awesome ward counselors, I have to throw that in, they're so on top of everything. You know, they're looking at the needs of each street and neighborhood in their wards, you know, to thinking, you know, is it still practical to have visitor parking, the dynamics of, permanent resident permit parking, because the dynamics of their neighborhood have shifted, you know, and the needs for parking. And it may be easier not to have to need to get resident or visitor parking at all. So I just wanted to offer the opinion that it might be helpful to focus on, you know, customer service and assistance that we've talked about, that I know that your office does. I've had conversations with the transportation department, ways to help at, and I've seen, you know, a visual that they do have a step-by-step images that they send to people on how to, as a walkthrough, and so I just wanted to put all that out there, observing these great conversations that we're having tonight about this, that I appreciate. My question is, since the program has been a couple of years now, right, for the automated, you know, permitting system and the readers, does it seem to be going in the right direction? Like, less people seem to be struggling and more people seem to be, you know, using the system? I was just wondering how you feel it's going since the rollout of this program. Like, you know, are you finding, you know, less inquiries, just things of that nature? Thank you.
I think overall, the feedback I'm hearing and staff are hearing is that people are getting used to it, and when there are instances of an individual who needs some help, my staff have told me that once they walk them through it once or twice, they kind of get it. I'd also say that The whole point of this was to make enforcement better so that the residents can park in their neighborhood. I don't know if that's a complaint that's been shared with counselors. Are you finding that residents are coming home and there's all these other people on their street, in their neighborhood, and they can't park? Because at the end of the day, for me, that's the purpose of this program, is to ensure that the residents can park in their neighborhood. It's a zone-based system. It's not intended for you to always be able to park on your street, let alone in front of your home, but in your neighborhood. That's, as I said, it started as a zone, a ward zone, a large swath of area where someone who lives in the Derby neighborhood could park in the Willows and vice versa. We have looked at that and we've changed that so that you could park in your neighborhood. So if there's an issue with people not being able to find parking in their neighborhood, I'd want to hear, more about that, or if there's issues with that. Again, I understand the technical challenges, but staff are always here to help. And again, I think the majority of people are doing it. I don't know specifically how large and how many people there are out there that are just struggling with doing this. And I know it's not perfect. I'll be the first to admit it, but so.
You just went, right? Go ahead.
Thank you. Not being a member of the committee, I have a question. You mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that we have 108 streets, roughly, that was full year resident parking?
Yes.
Okay. So by my estimation, that makes Ward 5 about a third of all of the city's year-round resident parking, because the impact in Wards 1 and 2, which traditionally are the downtown neighborhoods, a lot of those streets are October only, or, well, now we're talking fall only. But Ward 5 is actually like taking the brunt, I think, of like what we consider as the year-round resident-only parking system. Would you generally agree with that? I'm saying the Salem State area, so like Ocean Ave over to Savoy and like Naples, that neighborhood.
I would say that, yes, it's also geographically a large area. It used to be, it was separated, and a lot of the demand for resident parking over the several years has been due to the university. I'll also note that of the 25 streets we removed, the majority were also from that area. So again, conditions have changed, and we continue to hear from other residents who don't necessarily want it or don't feel they need it anymore on the street. That's not to say everyone on the street is like that, but so yes, I think it has to do with the geographic size, and that the university was part of that.
Yeah. I asked the question just because I do think there's kind of a tale of two Salems when we talk about the when we talk about the year-round resident parking program, because I do think that when you are downtown, I think, like we heard it from Justin Whittier, who's the president of a neighborhood association downtown, right? Like, there is a lot of desire for the resident-only parking program downtown, because I do think many residents feel like it really protects them. And it's also an area of Salem that is much closer to public transportation options, right? The train is right there. It's just a more accessible spot. Whereas out where I live, like Ocean Forest Ave area, as you get closer to the college, I think for most residents I talk to, they feel it is a burden, unless they are operating off of, I would say, somewhat outdated assumptions about Salem State, because I do think there's a lot of misinformation about I think a lot of people don't realize enrollment at Salem State is down by like over half of what it was 10 years ago. I don't think people realize that Salem State built all of this new parking in the last 10 years, despite decreasing enrollment. So I do think there's a lot of fear, potentially. Like, I think that the holdouts are like people who are fearful of Salem State taking all of our parking, but most people don't have that history because they moved here more recently and do not understand why we have resident-only parking. So my larger question is, I know that I understand that the historic policy has been that to take a street out of the resident parking plan, we've had to do like a survey of the residents, generally. Is that accurate?
When we did the larger swath, we were basing it on utilization, and we invited residents from those streets when we were having those discussions with the commission and then with the council. But under those circumstances, we looked at any streets that were only seeing less than 20% participation. We worked with council to remove them. Since that time, we have worked with ward councilors, at-large councilors, to specifically send out surveys to target, not just for removal, but to see if certain streets want it. And we've recently, the commission has adopted criteria for new streets who may want to request it. There's like a two-step process. So that's separate from existing streets, but yes, the short answer is yes, the survey is the best way, because just like we're looking for participation from a new street from everyone, because you're being asked to buy something, we want to make sure that is, at the very least, the majority of the people are in agreement that they no longer want it.
I would love to have a conversation with you at some point that's not right here about making larger changes to more of the Salem State neighborhood. Because I do want the residents' voices included, I do think a lot of residents are operating off of outdated information with Salem State. And I think my other question to you is, let's say we removed 33% of the streets that are year-round, which would be roughly Ward 5. If we removed all of those streets from the year-round resident parking, how much time would that save your team?
It would be, it would let us focus on other things, other parts of the city, again, depending on the time of year. But, I think it's Zone E that has the most, 31 streets.
Yeah. Great. Okay. And then I will just say, in terms of the comments about doing electronic plate readers plus a placard, I understand that would be a logistical nightmare. My understanding is that we do, at least in October, do that near Saltonstall with the teachers, right?
I think the school gives those out.
Yeah.
But again, the enforcement around there does not begin until 5 p.m.
I see.
on those October streets. So
it's a rare instance that's happened.
Yeah.
I know the school is handing out placards right now. They make the placards themselves, and the parking enforcement officers are kind about it because they're teachers. But that is something that is currently happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. If I may, through you, Councilor King, for example, last year, the entire President's neighborhood had resident parking. I removed the entirety of that program within the President's neighborhood. You have that authority to do that. Obviously, it's a will of the body to say yes to you, but you can get creative, and I would urge you to do that, and see how things go. Like, for instance, once I removed all that parking, there hasn't been any issues. There hasn't been issues with removing the parking. So it's to your discretion and your neighbors for you to advocate for them and give us some orders and be like, I'm going to change this and see how it goes. It'll always be changed back. Councilor Tarowski and then Councilor Presnowski.
Thank you, Chair Varela, not being a member of the committee. If we could excuse my previous suggestion to skirt the law. It would depend on the technical capabilities of the license plate reader system. I think there's some math involved in, like, they obscure things that aren't around the plates, right? There's some algorithm that they use to filter what they see. But if there were a way to make like a little vinyl decal that's brightly colored that you could stick next to your license plate so it's in kind of the same frame of reference, link it to the residence plate or put the plate number on it. Again, that would depend on the capabilities of the system, but it's something that the plate reader could potentially see on the drive-by and process as it goes by.
this is in the case of visitor. I'd have to research that to see if that's...
I'm happy to help you look into it.
Councilor Brzezinski.
Thank you, Chair Varela. First, thank you, David. I know you're taking a lot from over here and probably going to go home and relax a little bit in your own way after this meeting. You know, we're talking old system versus new system. And actually, you know, it's the old system had pros and cons, the new system has pros and cons. I think that we could take the best of both systems and somehow integrate them together and make it work further. I don't want people to think that because resident parking is like a privileged neighborhood, because I've gotten that before, and a sense of that actually coming out of this over here. People who live in a resident parking area are cursed. It's not a privilege, it's the opposite. The reason that it's a resident parking area is because there's a problem over there. They're either living too close to an attraction, and the visitors take up the parking spaces on those streets, or there's a business such as Salem State College that takes up, the college students take up the residence. There's a reason that the resident parking is on those streets, and it's necessary, because otherwise you'd have no place to park. Under the new system, under the old system, there was a sticker and a placard. So if anybody on the street didn't have a sticker or a placard, everybody in the neighborhood knew that that car didn't belong there. Under the new system, there's no sticker, there's no placard. So when you go down your street, you can't tell who belongs there and who doesn't. Because you know the neighbors' cars, but you don't know who their visitors are going to be. And if there's out-of-state plates, you can't just assume that it's not a visitor, that it could be a tourist coming through. So again, I'm talking about the pros and cons. I like Councilor King's statement that, maybe we have two Salems over here. We have a downtown Salem, which needs to be addressed, especially with the contractors, and then the resident part of it. Because when you have a contractor working in your house, I know in my neighborhood, if I see contractors working on my neighbor's house, you give them slack because you're their neighbor. You even ask them if they need any help, or if they want use any tools in your driveway or whatever. That's part of being neighborly. I did take offense when you stated that the person that's issuing the tickets, if there was a placard system, would have to get out of his car, take the time to get out of his car to check the placard. Whose time is more valuable? My time, because I have to stop everything that I'm doing to call in or to check in or anything. I'm using my time to do that instead of his time, and he's on salary to get out of his car. I'm not getting paid to do that. He's getting paid to get out of his car to check the placard. It's taken me a lot more time to register it by phone or by computer than it is for him to get out and check the placard. So I think there's a big difference there. Just to wrap it up and go back around, there were pros and cons in both of them, and I really think that with this discussion, this may open up something that we can come to that'll work for all of us. So, David, I honestly thank you for taking the time for this.
Under discussion, Councilor, I'm just joking. Councilor Merkel. Go next.
Thank you, Chair Varela. Not being a member of the committee, I'll be brief. I just wanted to reiterate what the at-large Councilor Hepworth had said at the beginning. I remember at the beginning of these conversations years ago getting a lot of requests for better and quicker enforcement. Just to reiterate that was part of the catalyst, that the readers would be beneficial, that they wanted to see enforcement be able to cover an area of more cars, more vehicles more quickly for better enforcement, because that was mostly the emails I got were there's no place to park, as you had mentioned earlier, that it was, there's a lack of parking because of the illegal vehicles, and we want better enforcement. So just want to make that point, that this was going to be helpful, that they could cover more ground faster.
Other discussion? Please, Councilor King.
Out of curiosity, thank you, not being a member of the committee. Out of curiosity, you've mentioned a couple times tonight instances where we will rescind tickets because we recognize that it's not a perfect system, which I appreciate. Would you ever be open to publicizing that, or at least putting it somewhere on the website that's like, you could phrase it as like common instances where there may be a confusion, and like, the parking department's very open to possibly, you could phrase it where you don't guarantee a rescission, but like,
We actually, when we do an October recap, this past year, we will indicate the number of tickets rescinded, and we give specific reasons for the rescinding of them. So I'm not against, putting that out there, so.
Awesome, thank you. And then my second question is, would you ever be open to having the option for a third guest pass at an additional higher rate? Like now, because it's $15.30, you could go to $45, but something where people who really do need it, there are instances, right, people where, for whatever reason, they do need a third visitor pass. I had a woman last year who lived in Ward 5, but she was trying to visit her father downtown, who also had he didn't know he could do the visiting nurse thing separate. Whatever it was, like, she was trying to visit her father during a certain time of year on a street where she, like, needed the resident-only parking, and he only had the 2 visitor passes and needed both of them, so he really needed a third, and just there was no option. You can make it more expensive, so less people would do it, but something where there is an option.
I mean, again, I could bring it to the commission for discussion, and ultimately it will be up to council to adopt that into the ordinance. If the even if the commission doesn't recommend it, you could put it forth today if you wanted to, so.
I would like people's feedback on things. It's a little known fact. I do like actually getting feedback on things. It's okay. All right. That's all I got. Thank you.
All right. Councilor Smith?
Yeah, just a statement here. Thank you, Chair. I learned through all this that people really like to call the police on folks who are in their neighborhood. They miss that. They miss that ability to call out the cars. And what happens now is they'll usually see an out-of-state plate and assume that must be somebody that doesn't belong there, or they'll see it for even months at a time. And that is somebody that probably doesn't belong there, because we shouldn't be having out-of-state plates that are in the system necessarily, although I believe we do. We've been through that. It's not necessarily a question, but it's trying to get at the root source of this. And I think a lot of that stems from a mistrust in the city's ability to enforce the parking. If people can't see it, they can't believe it. So if they don't see a placard and a sticker, they don't believe that that car belongs here. And they liked having that tangible ability to see it. I'm not saying whether that's good or bad. I'm just simply stating the fact that we might have more of a mistrust and miscommunication problem, as I usually think we do, than we have an actual enforcement problem or an actual technology problem. Because some of it, most of the complaints that I hear are not about the system working. They're about the fact that somebody can no longer call the police on people that are parked in their street. That is the single thing that people get most upset about, at least in my experience. And so I'm wondering how we can actually deal with that, how we can actually address that. And one thing to do, way to do that is to actually publish these numbers so it's very readily available, so that we can see what enforcement is happening, how many tickets are being issued, or how many, and maybe it is available, maybe I just don't know where it is. I mean, you sent me this stuff because I asked for it, but if other people can find that, so that they're able to see a little bit more transparently what the city is doing to protect resident parking. I also don't hear a lot of people complaining, hey, I can't find a spot on my street, because the system is working. People are getting in the system, they're actually able to do it, and it sounds like you rescind tickets. So I don't see a problem with the new system, but I know that other people do. I just want to say that. I do not see a problem with this system. I also do want to mention that I don't think downtown should pay more for contractors because they're downtown, or I don't think downtown should pay more for, resident parking and stuff because they're downtown. They still live in Salem. There's one Salem, not 2 Salems, that we should charge people downtown more money for things, but that's all I want. They put up with enough. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kucharski, for your time. I really appreciate it. We're going to move to public comment. Anyone in the room would like to give public comment? Please come up.
Thank you, Councilor Verla, members of the committee. My name is Peg Harrington. I'm a lifelong resident of Salem. I currently live in the Derby Street neighborhood. I have some questions. Councilor Turowski has been gracious enough to sit and listen to me and take notes on my concerns about this process, but I want it on the record. This system is cumbersome and difficult. It is not age-friendly, particularly for the visitor parking passes, and it's an invasion of privacy, quite frankly. It's not relevant now, but when I lived off the common and the placard and sticker thing was in place, I was dating an undercover state police investigator. I was not going to ask him to put his license plate on a city website so he didn't get a ticket. He could hang the visitor placard, no harm, no foul. I think that a hybrid situation would do the job with this. I won't remove my expired resident sticker pass from my windshield because I don't trust the parking enforcement, which is wildly inefficient. I got a ticket because I had my sticker on my vent window because of the shape of my windshield. And I was parked on the street. And I got a ticket because my sticker was in the wrong place. I mean, it was rescinded, but why do I have to go through that time and aggravation as someone who pays for a sticker and at the time paid for resident placards? I will also add that the system as it currently stands, where you have to go to a separate portal to register visitors, is ridiculous, and I won't do it, all right? I have placards, and I will admit there are times when I've had more placards because the system was written in Sharpie. Why don't we just put a barcode on existing placards or on new placards so that we know that this barcode or this UPC code is attached to my plate that is registered in the system? I don't understand why that can't be the case. I had a friend who would come to visit me, and I gave him one of those passes. I never had 5 people at my house at one time, but he had that placard in his glove box so that when he came to see me, he could just put the placard in the windshield, and it made perfect sense. The other issue that I will raise is that the enforcement is wildly inconsistent. Because I only have my plate registered, I will go out and park on the street, and I usually don't have a problem finding a parking place outside of silly tourist season. I can park on Carlton Street if my sister is coming over for dinner. But why I need to do that, because the enforcement is so, even though it's resident parking only, I never know when it's going to be enforced or not. Is she going to get a ticket for coming to my house for supper? I don't know. So on the better part of valor, I park on the street so she can have my off-street parking space. I think that this, for a city that posits itself as being age-friendly, and I've heard this from people in the parking department, when they try to help senior residents get the passes, they cannot even use the Salem site themselves to help a resident do it. I don't want an online tutorial showing me screenshots. If I'm an elderly person who has no computer skills, I'm relatively computer literate, but like Councilor Prasnowski said, it's a pain in the neck. Why should I have to do that every time someone comes over to my house for a glass of wine? Stop by the house, I'll give you a placard. If you're going to be coming to my house once or twice a week, put the placard in your glove box. Use it when you come to see me. That's fine. I'll pay for that privilege. But this system is just cumbersome and unfair to residents who don't have the time or the inclination to do this. One last question, Councilor Varela. You mentioned earlier that the move towards automation and computerization is all a step in the right direction. Slightly off topic. A branch was hit on the city tree in front of my house earlier this winter by a contractor, as it happened. And it sheared off the branch very roughly. I called the shade tree department at the Green Lawn Cemetery. I left a message. I didn't hear back. I called the next day. And the woman said, oh yes, I got your message. You have to register that with C-Click-Fix. I can't help you. Now I'm talking to the shade tree department. There's got to be a level of, okay, let's make this work for you. You're a resident, you're doing the right thing, you don't want this tree to die because it was damaged, but you have to go online to fix it. I think it's gone a little bit too far. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Harrington. All right.
What she said. Brendan Walsh, 5 West Terrace, old school teacher, so I bring handouts. Can't have a class without them. And before I get started on this, yeah, we're talking about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, between efficiency and community service, and the ageism that is rampant in this whole thing. So I'm going to read this just to have it in the record you have in front of you, but I begin with a comment regarding the understanding of neighborhoods on the part of the parking enforcement people. I'm extremely upset and indeed insulted by the parking authority referring to the sharing of placards by neighbors as abuse. Circumstances like weddings, funerals, etc. may result in many one-time visitors to a street. When we had placards, neighbors would ask neighbors permission to use the neighbors' placards for their visitors. The parking folks call this abuse. I call it neighborliness. It would seem very simple to connect with companies, and this part maybe I may be a little bit off on because you were talking more about downtown, but it does seem to me that companies doing business in Salem, plumbers, electricians, contractors, gardeners, etc., have them submit plate numbers to parking, and a reasonable annual fee would be acceptable. And I'm told a couple of times now tonight that this has been done with a visiting nurse, but by the way, when you cook with a wok, chop everything first. Don't, didn't mean to, but I had a visiting nurse tell me that he was ticketed despite his VNA placard and incidentally his veterans plates. So there are people also, painters, carpenters, etc., who may not have commercial plates but do a lot of work in Salem. And they should have a way to get the, they should be allowed to register a plate for recognition citywide or simply given a placard by their client. It makes perfect sense. I had a painter in my house the other day who got ticketed because I forgot to go in and change the plate, which, being 86 years old, I tend to forget a lot of things. And also I was told that the appeals, and this one bothered me too, and I hope it's not true. I'm told that appeals are only online because parking does not want to be confronted live by, quote, angry people. To this, I would respond that Salem is a democracy, where people feeling wronged can confront their accuser, not a nerdocracy, where there is no human element. Given all the possible choices, it would seem to me that the choice that most combines fairness and efficiency is a hybrid system of scanners and placards and an annual appeal process, rather, involving a magistrate. I would suggest that the council and the mayor get together, examine all aspects, and agree upon a system that works for all concerned, that effectiveness and fairness top efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. All right. Anyone else in the audience? Looks like there's no one here, so we will go to Zoom. I'm going to start with Mr. Laffey. Go ahead.
Hi, Phil Laffey, 143 Fort Avenue. So I want to thank Councilor Prozniewski for bringing this to the fore. It's a contentious issue. And one of the things, everything was really covered off. Mr. Walsh talked about sharing placards, which was great. Back in the day, if my neighbor had a wedding or, a 4th of July party and they needed to borrow some placards, I could just give them to them. Now I have to, go into the system and put their guests into my portal, which is ridiculous. Regarding revenues, one thing that when this came out, the city refused to do is to include violations of the resident, the visitor pass program as revenue. That is revenue, because if you didn't have the program, you wouldn't have that revenue. So that groups that have more than pays for the program. Lastly, I wanted to talk about the Sorry, brain fart. The effectiveness of enforcement. I heard a lot tonight about this is a great program. Enforcement's better. It's faster. It's more efficient. I live in the Willows, as you all know. The Willows is very busy in the summertime. I did a FOIA request from July 2nd till August 16th of last year, asking for the number of tickets for this area, Ford Avenue in the surrounds, and the type of ticket. The number of resident tickets issued between July 2nd and August 16th, which includes July 4th, Black Picnic, and Jazz Fest, some of the most busy times down the Willows. If I told you there was one violation, would you believe me? Well, that's how many there were. One violation. One ticket given for resident-only parking. I've shown photographic evidence of the street, Ford Avenue, lined with cars in the resident zone, parked in front of fire hydrants for hours with zero enforcement. So if this is a better system, I'd hate to see it worse. Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Laffey. Next, we have Mr. Steve Kapantis.
Good evening, Steve Kapantis, Wisteria Street, Salem. First, I really appreciate the conversation by the councilors regarding the cost of the program and the revenue of the program. If you are going to take the time to review that data, please ask for the specifics, because I can tell you some of the things that have tried to be included in the past are unrelated to the cost of this system. I'll give you one example. If a police officer goes out to write a resident parking ticket, who's already on duty, already collecting his salary, already working his shift for that day, the parking department included his time and his fringe benefits as part of the cost of the resident parking system. The first time I asked for it, they actually tried to claim that plowing the streets was part of the resident parking program. So please pay very close attention to the data that you're being given and how they're calculating it. Next, the system right now is not working for all residents, and it needs to work for all residents. Perhaps in the future it will work, but we need to do something so that those who are elderly, those who are handicapped, or those that are having a hard time with the city's system can hang a placard. Doesn't need to be forever, but we need to do something now so that it works for everybody. Last, my third comment, I guess I have to say through you, Chair Varela, to Councilor Prosnowski, please, the next time you clean your gutters, have your son go up the ladder and you hold it. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kapantis. Next, we have Constance Clearlander. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
It's Constance Arlander. Salem is supposed to be a city for all ages. Nothing about the visitors parking with the placards not being available is for all ages. It's actually blocking senior citizens from using the system. Brendan Walsh said it perfectly. He also put it in the paper so that people could read that. At least you need to give senior citizens placards. Some don't even have computers. And from what I understand, or what I was told, the downtown parking office isn't open on weekends to help people who need help to register visitors. So that is another issue. I would very much like to know if somebody can tell me how many senior citizens were even had the discussion before you decided to take this new system under advisement. How many senior citizens did you ask? Do they have computers? Do they know how to use them? Could they do this? And I really would like to have an answer for that. A hybrid system would help. It would help the seniors. It would help people who have a lot of visitors. If there have been people who have had doctor's appointments or surgeries and they have OT, they have speech, they have other visitors helping them when they get home. And that isn't a time when you really want to try and figure out how to register these helpers. As far as enforcement, we live near the courthouse. There are constantly people going to the courthouse at all times of the day that park on Federal Street that do not get ticketed. They don't have they didn't used to have placards and they were easily identified. But now that we have this new system, I was curious as to how they escape not getting a ticket. And there were 2 cars parked in front of the Pierce Nichols house for at least 6 months. Didn't move at all. When people brought this up to the parking department downtown in the garage, we were told it is a police matter. And when you reported it to the police, they were not ticketed. One of them wasn't even registered with having the, they weren't registered with the state. They didn't get their car inspected, but that didn't matter. And when people called up about it, a statement was made, well, they had their parking permit. They've paid for that, so they can stay. So I don't quite understand how some people don't get ticketed, don't even move during one of the snowstorms, and they didn't get towed. So I am hoping that you could also tell me if this is a quicker way of looking at the time spent by the people who are enforcing this. What happens with that time they've saved? Do they get off earlier? Do they go to new neighborhoods? They're not walking up and down the streets, which take a lot more time than using the car. Could anybody help me? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harlander. And I'll just let you know that this is a public comment, not a question answer period, but I do recommend you reach out to your ward counselor and the traffic parking department, and they'll absolutely be able to help you out with your questions. So thank you for your comment. Next, we have Pamela J. Go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having this tonight. I really appreciate the discourse. I've learned a few things, and it's been helpful. I agree with like all the comments that have been made. I live at 19 Gedney Street, and there's a finite number of spaces here, and I didn't realize that it meant the zone meant that I could park kind of where anywhere in my zone. It wasn't intended to be for the street. But with the issues going on in the neighborhood here, the expansion of Life Bridge, there's a lot of activity. Like I'm no longer feel safe walking around here at night. So for me to park 2-3 blocks away does not feel like a solution. I think the note that you don't encourage it, but that you don't do anything about it, like if I could park on Chestnut Street, I'm not thinking that's like a viable solution. I think what's really frustrating is that I know who belongs on our street. I know the neighbors, I know their cars. And routinely, there's an influx of out of state plates. There's one out of state who's been here for years. Now, I didn't know that maybe they could be, but they're here all year long. It's not like a half of the year. Anyway, I am also in favor of the barcode and some kind of way of knowing how you guys check. because I don't understand when you're saying it's very easy to drive by. If it's reading a license plate and the cars are parked very close together, how are they reading a plate when you can't see the plate? The only way to see the plate is to get out of the car and walk between the cars. Like, I'm not understanding the efficiency here. So I guess I will too follow up with my ward rep, because I'm very interested in how Airbnbs are being addressed here. I sometimes think there's a lot of that going on with the out of state. The home health workers, like, there should be a something just that they can have, an identifiable piece that's just not something anyone wants to deal with home health care. And I guess more than anything is why this was never brought up for any kind of voting or input from residents before it was just implemented. It sounds like it costs more than the old program cost, than the cost of the old program. And again, I think as somebody else mentioned, that on the weekends, you have nobody to call. And the times that I actually have called the Salem PD, they've left with many tickets on cars. So for me, I know that we're not being checked. I just know it. And I don't call because I don't leave my house a lot anymore, because I don't want to not have to have I don't want to walk a block or two to get to my house. So anyway, I deeply appreciate this being raised tonight, and I agree with all the comments that have come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. All right, next we have Mr. Whittier. Go ahead. Justin, you still with us? Going once, going twice. Justin Whittier. Give you a moment. Okay. All right, that ends public comment. All right, so I'll say one thing. So just to be clear for the public's knowledge, this order is about the discussion and not necessarily an action tonight. That being said, I would personally be open to a change in the program. If one of you here in the body was to amend the ordinance in specificity, I would most likely welcome it. The new parking program is still new and ongoing. We'll never get this right the first time. This parking system should be accommodating to all residents. I agree with that, and I want to commend our traffic and parking department for trying to find a way when it comes to upholding enforcement. And I think that's what these LPR readers have done, is made it more efficient for us to actually enforce parking on resident streets. So with that, under discussion. Councilor King.
Thank you. Not being a member of the committee, I just through all the discussions and having a minute to think and also hearing public comment, I have 3 ideas that I would be curious what your thoughts would be. Not to make any changes to anything tonight, but just more if you're open to these types of ideas. The first one, I know we want to not have placards, right? It would be a lot, but just to minimize the amount of placards, but still possibly have a placard system of subtype, would you be open to a optional, people would have to apply for it, placard that you would have to qualify for by either being over 65 or disabled? In the same way that today, people who want to get multiple small trash cans have to say that they're over 65 or disabled. That's like a process the city goes through already. So that, I realize that that's a whole thing, but would that be maybe something we could consider?
I can talk about it with the mayor, see if that's an approach you would like to explore.
Awesome. And then I will just add to that, we'll have a conversation about possibly removing some streets, because I definitely think we could save some money by removing some streets, maybe in Ward 5. I will put ourselves up on the sacrificial lamb to maybe offset a potential cost that would be incurred from that. I think that might be a good balance there. And then the last thing, because I feel bad, when I say Tale of Two Salems, I more mean just about the resident parking. I'm not trying to make contractors pay more to be downtown. My last thought was just, so for when a contractor's in like a metered spot, I still think the $15 a day per car makes perfect sense. Could we possibly explore a program where a contractor could basically get a for non-metered spots, just for like on regular resident-only parking streets, get like a $30 a year per vehicle pass, basically in the same way that like a resident gets a $30 per year pass. And this would be something that contractors only who work regularly in Salem would probably want, because it's the only ones that would be worth it for. But something like that, where basically contractors would have the same option for, and you'd have to put restrictions on it, so it's like only specific types of vehicles to make sure they're actually like contractors, it's the commercial or whatever it is. But just something where that does allow for contractors to do work all over Salem, because I do see there's a scenario today where like a contractor might not take a job if it's on a resident-only street, if they think they're gonna have to pay $15 a day, per day, and then you end up with a situation where residents might like be paying vastly more for certain work, but depending on what street they live on, or not being able to get construction on their house that they need, so something like that.
Again, we could certainly explore that, see if it's possible.
Great, thank you.
All right, Councilor Hepworth, and then Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there may be a will on the committee to try to compel some sort of a change on the visitor passes. I don't know yet that there's a will on the full council yet. I think there's just interest in this discussion right now. I'll also say I don't know that it's preferable or appropriate for us to mandate the way that the mayor enforces what we expect to happen, which is we expect to see resident-only parking enforced throughout the city, and there to be visitor passes present. What method they use may change with technology over time. Not to say that we couldn't, but I think that I think there's probably a will to do something different and to continue this conversation. So if I had my choice, I would leave this in committee with an understanding of the conversation that we've had here and some of the desires of the council, and then bring this up again as we continue to explore this with residents and each other, but open to, and this was brought forth by my at-large colleagues, so I just want to open it up to the floor on what we want to do with this here. I don't know that we're ready to make an ordinance change, or if that would even be appropriate here.
Councilor Smith and Councilor Storiak.
Thank you, Chair. Changing subject back here a little bit. Have you ever looked into other parking systems like an RFID reader, which could be read up to 30 feet, is my understanding?
We haven't, to my knowledge. The license plate reader technology was the one that we were looking at, and looking at what other communities, when they had rolled it out, their experiences were.
The reason I ask is because that is a physical tag. I mean, we can know exactly where somebody is on the Boston Marathon route in 2 weeks from now. And we could know what car is where, and so obviously there might be privacy concerns around that, but it's only, the difference is it's actually only read up to 30 feet. So your car can go around, can beep, beep, beep when it reads the correct car, when it finds a car that isn't in the system or doesn't have a placard. It can be a physical thing that it can communicate with. You would have a physical chip put on your car. It solves the privacy issue of the license plate reader. It solves the technology issue of the not having the placard. It just seems like something that we could look into. My guess is it could be more expensive. Everything's always more expensive. But it does solve almost all of our issues. Is that something you would be willing to get a quote on for our parking system, with the idea that this body could probably just end up voting for placards, and then we don't have any kind of, we have all this camera equipment that we can't even use?
I'd have to do a lot more research to figure that out, and again, I'd want to touch base with the mayor to see how he wants me to, what time he wants me to focus on.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Zordiak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it as not a member of the committee. I'm wondering if, before all of this, has the city, your staff, looked at comparable cities that have also tried to tackle this, modernizing their parking system? And if not, as you answer some of our questions, if you could provide some of those examples that you can sort of see their best practices, how they've struggled with that and then overcame with those struggles. I think that would help us better understand of the limitations of what we're trying to accomplish here, and then also let us know what can be accomplished, because I know we're talking a lot about different ways we can scan things, or this barcodes, or the example the Councilor Ward 2 provided. But at the end of the day, if the proprietary system, the private sort of company and their equipment that we're using cannot do those things, then we just cannot do them. And so we need to understand the limitations. And then also going off of Councilor Hapworth's comments, a lot of this has to do with the mayor's sort of direction and how he wants to run the city, right? There's only so much that we can dictate, and if we do so, it has to be a very explicit and direct way. So we need to understand those limitations, that if we were going to go that route, that we can make sure that we do that without making unintended consequences. So if you can provide those examples and maybe the limitations of what we're dealing with, it will help us direct what we can actually accomplish here as City Council. Thank you.
All right, under discussion. Councilor Brzezinski.
Thank you, Chair Varela. I'm hoping that what comes out of this when you bring this over to the mayor is that the mayor takes a deep dive into it, and like he's done in the past, historically, is he's put together a team, maybe a task force, or something that would be comprised of people who are affected by this, to people from different neighborhoods, maybe different councilors, maybe people of different ages, different parts of the city. Every neighborhood that has resident parking, is the reason that they have it for different reasons. The people on Daniel Street are certainly a lot different reasons than they have them down the Willows, or the reasons up by the college. So if you have representation from all the people that are affected, maybe there could be some kind of a think tank that could come up with a quick solution. Like I say, I think there's pros and cons on both of them. I like the play reader car. I don't think this dissolves it. I think it enhances it. So I think the two of them combined together the ingredients would come up with something that would be quite efficient. Thank you.
All right, under discussion, Councilor Turowski.
I just wanted to say thank you for coming here and speaking with us tonight, Mr. Kucharski. It was really appreciated to have your insights.
You're welcome.
All right, under discussion, guys, I entertain a motion. I think it's that time. Councilor Hapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Motion to leave in committee.
Councilor Hapworth, I can't, Jesus, guys, it's getting late. Councilor Hapworth motions that this matter remain in committee, seconded by Councilor Smith. All those in favor? Let the record show. I see 4 hands plus my own, so that matter remains in committee. Entertain another motion. Councilor Hapworth.
Motion to adjourn.
Councilor Hapworth motions to adjourn, seconded by Councilor Smith. All in favor? Thank you. 4 hands plus my own. Thank you, everybody.